Welcome back to the Spectral series, a podcast where we look at the unexplained creepy things that have happened. Today I'm going to be looking into the bizarre Bermuda Triangle by myself. I'll take you through some of the most compelling cases that took place here. So the Bermuda Triangle is also known as the Devil's Triangle, and it's a region that spans over 4,400 miles of sea, where ships, planes, and people have alleged to mysteriously vanished. The early instances of strange disappearance in the area were reported in 1908. Since then, we're still talking about the area. Also, just putting it out there, Christopher Columbus also reported a weird, fireball in the sky crashing into the sea whilst he was sailing to America, I think, if I'm getting my history right. And that happened in the Bermuda Triangle. Just a little interesting bit there. I'll leave a link in the description for a website that lists all the disappearances in the area. It's a ridiculously huge list if you want to check it out. I got quite a bit of my information for this episode from the website. I was going to count all the disappearances on the site, but it's actually so much. The last listed vehicle to disappear on the list was in 2001. So, where actually is the Bermuda Triangle? There's nothing official about the Bermuda Triangle. It's not like a registered territory. It's not even shown on maps. But it's understood that it stretches from Florida to the island of Bermuda and to San Juan in Puerto Rico. So first we're going to be talking about the Scorpion USN submarine that disappeared in the Bermuda Triangle. So this was a huge submarine. It displaced 3,075 tons of water when it was on the surface and 3,500 tons when it was actually submerged. It consisted of 6 torpedo tubes. She left Norfolk on the 15th of February 1968, Mediterranean deployment. She operated with the 6th Fleet into May and then headed west for home. On the 21st of May, she indicated her position to be about 50 miles south of Azores. 6 days later, she was reported overdue at Norfolk. A search was initiated, but on the 5th of June, Scorpion and her crew were declared presumed lost. Her name was taken off the Navy list on the 30th of June. The search, however, continued, and at the end of October, the Navy's research ship Mizar located sections of the Scorpion's hull, more than 10,000 feet of water, and about 400 miles southwest of Azores. The Court of Inquiry was reconvened and other vessels, including the submersible Tracy, were dispatched to the scene and collected pictures and other data. So this ship, the submarine, was completely torn apart and they were just finding pieces of it thousands of miles away? 400 miles away from each other. So it kind of begs the question, how did this happen that nobody knew about it? You know, if it was an enemy that blew the submarine up, surely there would have been some sort of record of it. Either that, or maybe it blew itself up and it just didn't send out any distress beacons, which it's hard to understand. These were all trained people, military people working on the submarine, and none of them thought to send out a distress beacon. But I don't know, it's just strange. Maybe other things were going on. Although the cause of her loss is still unknown, the most likely reason for its sinking was an accidental activation of the battery of Mark 37 torpedo during a torpedo inspection. The torpedo, in a fully ready condition without a propeller guard, then began a live hot run within the tube. Released from the tube, the torpedo became fully armed and successfully engaged with its nearest target, the Scorpion, looping back to where it had just been fired from. Alternatively, the torpedo may have exploded in the tube, creating an uncontrollable fire in the torpedo room. The explosion broke the boat into two major pieces, with the forward hull section, including the torpedo room, and most of the operations compartment, creating one trench, while the end section, including the reactor department and the engine room, created a second impact trench. The sail detached and ended up nearly in a large debris field. Because of the pressurized water nuclear reactor in the engine room, deep ocean radiological monitoring operated. The sail detached and ended up in a nearby large debris field. Because of the pressurized water nuclear reactor in the engine room, deep ocean radiological monitoring and operations were conducted in August and September 1986. The site had previously been monitored in 1968 and 1979, and none of the samples obtained showed any evidence of radioactivity. So yeah, this is basically saying most likely there was an accident on board and a mistake was made and the torpedo fired and blew itself up, pretty much. I don't understand how, if one fired by accident, it would loop back to itself. I don't know, I don't work on a submarine, I don't know if that's likely or if that's happened before. But it seems a bit odd. I can buy, however, the fire starting in the room because a torpedo accidentally went off but didn't leave the tube that it was in. I could buy that. That seems pretty realistic. And maybe it just happened so fast and the communications were in the front end of the ship, but most of the people were in the back end of the ship, so they couldn't get a SOS out before the parts separated. And I mean, at that point, once they separated, I'm sure everyone would have been dead on board anyway from all the pressure. But I don't know, it's strange. And it's strange that there was no radioactivity in the water. Or maybe that's just the government saying that there's no radioactivity, because if a nuclear reactor has been destroyed in the ocean, or even though it was just leaking in the ocean, surely that would have caused some big issues, and maybe the government just didn't want to deal with that, I guess. But yeah, it's really sad. It's very sad. It's terrifying, the idea of being in a submarine, and this is worst case scenario. Yeah, it's crazy that this happened, and it's crazy that we don't know what happened for sure, even though there was so much research went into this and so many teams went out there and they just couldn't figure it out. The next thing we're going to be talking about is Flight 19. So about 10 minutes past 2 in the afternoon on the 5th of December 1945, Flight 19, consisting of 5 TBM Avenger torpedo bombers, departed from the US Naval Air Station, Fort Lauderdale, Florida, on an overwater national training flight. They were to execute navigation problem number 1, which is as follows: depart 26 degrees 3 minutes north and 80 degrees 7 minutes west, and fly 91 degrees 56 miles to Hen and Chickens Shoals to conduct low-level bombing. After bombing, continue on course 91 degrees for 67 miles, fly course 346 degrees, distance 73 miles, fly course 241 degrees, distance 120 miles, then returning to US Naval Air Station, Fort Lauderdale, Florida. So, obviously, you don't need to follow what I just said. That was just, they had a clear training exercise that they needed to execute, that they'd probably done quite a few times before, I imagine. This seems quite straightforward, everything was completely planned out. and yet they still disappeared, crashed, or whatever happened to them, even though everything was very straightforward and they knew exactly what they needed to do and when they needed to do it. In charge of the flight was a senior qualified flight instructor. He was also piloting one of the planes. The other planes were piloted by qualified pilots with between 350 and 400 hours flight time, of which at least 55 was in the same type aircraft they were flying that day. The weather over the area covered by the track of the navigational problem consisted of scattered rain showers, visibility of 6 to 8 miles in showers, and 10 to 12 otherwise. Surface winds were 20 knots, with gusts of 31 knots. The sea was moderate to rough. The general weather conditions were considered average for training flights of this nature within showers. A radio message intercepted at about 4 p.m. was the first indication that the Flight 19 was lost. So basically, a lot of people say Flight 19 was probably lost because of poor weather conditions, which is why most, aeroplanes or whatever do get lost. But it's basically saying the weather conditions weren't that bad. They were pretty average at best the day of the flight. The message saying that they were lost was believed between the leader of Flight 19 and another pilot in the same flight, indicated that the instructor was uncertain of his position and direction of the Florida coast. The aircraft and compasses also stopped working during this flight. Attempts to establish communications on the trading frequency weren't working due to interference from Cuba broadcasting stations, static and atmospheric conditions. Radio contact was lost before the exact nature of the trouble or location of the flight could be figured out. So the two pilots were kind of talking to each other. One of them wasn't sure where he was at. And then before, the command center, I guess you could call it, could contact them, all radio was cut and they couldn't ask them what was going on or couldn't provide any help. Indications are that the flight became lost somewhere east of Florida and was unable to determine a course to return to their base. The flight was never heard of again and no trace of the planes were ever found. It is assumed they made forced landings at sea in darkness somewhere east of Florida, maybe running out of gas. It is known that the fuel carried by the aircraft would have completely run out by 8 p.m. The sea in that area was rough and unsuitable for water landing. It is also possible that some unexpected and unforeseen development of the weather conditions may have happened, although there is no evidence of freak storms in the area at the time. So, if they did land, well, surely their planes must have gone down at some point. It would have been really tough for them to survive that. It would have been really strange if they had to emergency land. If they were really, really lost, they must have been lost for hours and hours because they had until 8 p.m. to run out of fuel. And that's a lot of time, I think, to complete this training exercise. They wouldn't send them out there if it was going to be really tight and they were going to run out. I don't know. Strange. All available facilities in the area were used in an effort to locate the missing aircraft and help them return to base. These efforts were not successful. No trace of the aircraft were ever found, even though a huge search operation was conducted, until the evening of the 10th of December 1945, when weather conditions turned to the point where further efforts became hazardous. Sufficient aircraft and surface vessels were used to cover those areas which the survivors of Flight 19 could be presumed to be located. Even one search aircraft was lost during the operation. A patrol plane, which was launched at approximately 7:30 p.m. on the 5th of December 1945 to search for the missing people. This aircraft was never seen or heard of again after takeoff. Based upon a report of a merchant ship off the coast of Fort Lauderdale, which cited a burst of flame, apparently an explosion, and passed through on an oil slick at the time, which matched the presumed location of the search aircraft. It is believed that this aircraft exploded at the sea and sank. No trace of the plane or its crew were ever found. So this is really strange. This isn't just like one plane going missing. This is like a huge amount of planes have gone missing in this short amount of time. Or like, not a short amount of time, all at once. And all the people on board, there weren't any traces of the planes or the people or anything. Even a search plane that went out after them was never seen or heard of again. That's really weird. For me, I know, okay, there's probably a lot of logical explanations, but it's weird that this is happening to all these different, like, big aircraft and they can't find them afterwards. And I know, okay, I'm not the type of person that's going to believe that it's aliens abducting people in the Bermuda Triangle, but the fact that all of these planes went missing and can't be found kind of makes me think of aliens. Because, like, where did they go? I know the sea's, like, deep, but, like, that's so many planes and so many people that are gone. Surely, where did they go? I don't know. It's strange. But it does sound like this merchant ship that saw, quote, a burst of flame. That probably was the rescue plane that went out to try and find them. But it's really odd. It's an odd case. So now we're going to talk about the USS Cyclops. This is one of the most well-known Bermuda Triangle disappearances. Volumes have been written about this vessel. The more you look into the case, the more confusing and mysterious it becomes. Also, two of her sister ships, the Protus and the Nereus, I probably pronounced those wrong, disappeared on almost the same route in 1941. The loss of those two ships was overshadowed by World War II, which is really weird. This ship goes disappeared, and then later on its sister ships both disappeared in the same year on the same, like, route that it took. That's really strange. Except for a voyage to Halifax, Nova Scotia, she served along the east coast until the 9th of January 1918, when she was assigned to overseas transportation service. She then sailed to the Brazilian waters to fuel British ships in the South Atlantic, receiving the thanks of State Department and Commander-in-Chief Pacific. She put to sea from Rio on the 16th of February 1918 after touching at Barbados on the 3rd and the 4th of March. Was never heard of again. Her loss, with 306 crew and passengers without a trace, is one of the sea's unsolved mysteries. There are way less details about this case because the ship or the remains of the 306 people on board have never been found. There were never any distress signals and the huge ship was just gone. I just want to let that sink in. There were 306 people on this ship, and none of them have ever been seen again. There's been no remains found. The huge bloody ship that was carrying them, no remains of that has ever been found either. And they're just gone. That's even more crazy than the planes being gone. This is a huge, huge ship with a huge amount of people on, and it's just gone, and it's crazy. It's crazy. I think there have been, like, books and films written on this case, but how does that happen? I mean, I guess it was, like, 1918, which was quite a while ago, but I just don't understand how how that would happen and people just not know what happened. There were no lifeboats found. I don't know. It's strange. So next up we are going to be talking about the Mary Celeste. On November the 7th, 1872, the 282-ton Mary Celeste set sail from New York Harbour on its way to Italy. On board were the ship's captain, Benjamin S. Briggs, his wife, Sarah, and their 2-year-old daughter, Sophia. They also had 8 crew members with them. Less than a month later, on December the 5th, a passing British ship spotted the Mary Celeste at full sail adrift about 400 miles east of Azores, with no sign of the captain, his family, or any of the crew. Aside from several feet of water in the hold, a missing lifeboat, the ship was undamaged and loaded with 6 months' worth of food and water. So the Mary Celeste had a shadowy past. Originally christened Amazon, it was given a new name after a series of unfortunate events, including sudden illness and death of its first captain, a collision with another ship in the English Channel, an investigation into whether or not to grant payment by its insurers to pay the de gratis crew for salvaging the ghost ship found no evidence of foul play. Mary Celeste would sail under different owners for 12 years before its last captain deliberately ran it aground in Haiti as part of an attempted insurance fraud. Since this mysterious event took place, the world has gone crazy with theories about what happened and people trying to profit from it. I've even spoken about this ship before in one of my YouTube videos, 5 famous ghost ships, if you want to check that out after this. Thought I'd just do a little bit of self-promotion in there. Theories over the years have ranged from mutiny, pirate attack, to assault by a giant octopus or sea monster, while there are more scientifically minded proposed an explosion caused by fumes by the 1,700 barrels of crude alcohol in the ship's hold. In 2001, writer and explorer Clive Cussler claimed to have found the wreck of the Mary Celeste, but later analysis of the timbers retrieved from the ship found the wood was still living at least a decade after the Mary Celeste sank. Sir Arthur Conan Doyle wrote a short story published in 1884 in which the inhabitants of the ghost ships fell victim to ex-slave seeking vengeance. That's a little bit... Okay, I don't know why I put that in there. Maybe I'll cut that out. I don't think it was an ex-slave seeking vengeance on the ship's owners. I mean, that would be pretty cool. You know, take that back. But I don't think so, no. On the less sensationalized end, an investigation chronicled in the 2000 documentary The True Story of the Mary Celeste was able to offer no definite conclusion, but did suggest a scenario in which a faulty chronometer, rough seas, and a clogged onboard pump could have led Briggs to abandon ship shortly after sighting land on November 25th, 1872. Now this is probably the most looked into theory, I think, that I found anyway, where one of the ship's meters was just off and it was telling them a different measurement, and for some reason, even though Briggs was obviously a really experienced captain and he had an experienced crew with him, led him to think, oh no, the ship is literally sinking, so we need to jump on those lifeboats and get out here. But again, it's just strange. I don't understand. Maybe if it was really, really rough seas and they got on the lifeboats and then realised the ship was fine, they might have been too far away to get back on, or... I mean, it does explain the one lifeboat being gone, so I guess this is probably the most likely thing to have happened. I do like the big octopus coming and taking them out though. I think that's pretty good. The possibility of natural disaster was also on the list. Many suggested a role of undersea earthquake behind the accident, while few proposed an accidental foraying, I don't know what that means, of the vessel into the Bermuda Triangle. So basically the earthquake moved the ship into the Bermuda Triangle, I guess is what they're saying. I don't know. Studies of the ship clearly ruled out the possibility of a pirate attack, since everything on the ship, including the barrels of alcohol it was transporting and the valuable belongings of the crew, were intact. So they don't know what happened. We know for sure it wasn't pirates, because why would the pirates leave everything behind? We know it wasn't an ex-slave seeking vengeance. We know it wasn't a giant octopus. I don't know. It's very strange, and I don't think we'll ever get a proper answer on it, but it's very interesting. So next up we're going to talk about the Ellen Austin. And when you talk about this case, you could either talk about the plain facts, which is a little bit more boring, or you could talk about the dramatised version that is well known. So I'm going to tell you the spooky version because I think it's an awful lot more interesting. In December 1880, the Ellen Austin left Liverpool for the long journey to New York, with a full manifest of immigrants looking to start their new lives. Several weeks into the voyage, the ship was lost in the mid-Atlantic Sea. After a few days, another ship drifted by, a schooner considerably smaller than the Ellen Austin. Captain Griffin studied it through his spyglass and saw nobody on board, and no identifying names or flags. Suspecting a pirate trick, he took no action at first. But after a few days, the schooner was still drifting nearby, and Griffin decided it would be a valuable salvage. So he took a small party of armed men over, boarded the schooner, and searched it. Nobody was on board, pirates or otherwise, and its logbook was missing. But its valuable cargo of mahogany wood was intact. Griffin put a prize crew aboard and claimed the schooner as a salvage. The two ships sailed together towards New York until a great storm arose and separated them. When the weather cleared a few days later, Captain Griffin could see no trace of the schooner. Finally, it was spotted far away, and the Ellen Austin changed its course to intercept it. The captain's spirits fell when he again lifted his spyglass and found the ship deserted just as before, with no sign of his crew. Griffin's crew understandably refused to try again, but were finally persuaded by the high profits promised by such a prize. The second crew boarded, all well armed, and with the understanding that the two ships would remain side by side, ringing their bells throughout the night. That very night, a dense fog fell, so thick that Ellen Austin lost sight of the schooner's lantern. But the reassuring bell continued to ring, until it didn't. The Ellen Austin clanged her bell throughout the night, but received no answer. In the morning the fog lifted, revealing an empty ocean. This time the loss was final, and no trace of the ghostly schooner or the men aboard her was ever seen again. So whether this happened or not, the way the captain described it, we won't know. But we do know this huge ship with lots of valuable cargo and passengers were lost at sea, and the ship was never seen again. Obviously, he kind of hammed it up. I think he probably wanted to sell the press on this story. But to be honest, I think this could have happened. It's really strange, and I don't know, something about it makes me think that this was real. The plain version is just like stating what happened without all the, we rang bells throughout the night to make sure we were okay. But essentially it was, we put men on the ship and then they disappeared, and then we put more men on the ship and then they disappeared along with the ship. Which, is crazy. It's crazy that happened. But yeah, it's very interesting. I really like that one. That's probably my favourite. Well, that's all we have time for today. If you stuck around for this long, thank you so much for listening. There are many more episodes to come, so stick around for some more unexplained creepiness.